Welcome to another lecture by MedicoMedics, Chapter 4, Transport Mechanisms Across Membranes. In this lecture, we will dive a bit deeper into why membrane transport is important, the overview of different mechanisms, discuss passive and active transport, bulk transport, transport in maintaining homeostasis, disorders related to membrane transport, and end with a summary. So why is membrane transport important? Well, cells need transport to, number one, import nutrients like glucose, oxygen, etc. We need transport to remove waste products like carbon dioxide. We need to maintain ionic and chemical balance, like the balance of sodium and potassium in the cell. And disruptions in transport can lead to diseases like dehydration, cystic fibrosis, etc. So we have passive transport and active transport. As we mentioned in previous lectures, passive transport is movement without the use of energy, while active transport requires energy. So you can think about them like if you're going uphill and you need to push this stone upwards, you have to combat gravity, right? This will require ATP, energy, to be pushed up. Compare that to passive transport where you're on the other side and you just let gravity do its thing. And we have terms like diffusion through osmosis, etc., where it facilitates with ease the descension of this stone here. Now, we also have special forms of transport like bulk transport, where we find endocytosis and exocytosis. But let's start with passive transport. So in passive transport, molecules move from high to low concentration down the gradient. Types include simple diffusion. Small nonpolar molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide move directly through the membrane. We have facilitated diffusion, where larger or charged molecules like glucose and ions require protein channels or carriers to get through. And then we have the process of osmosis, with the movement of water through aquaporins towards higher solute concentration. Now, sometimes cells need to move things against the gradient, which requires energy. So let's discuss active transport. Now, the definition is molecules moving from low to high concentration, meaning against the gradient, so uphill, right? We will need ATP, energy. So examples include a sodium-potassium pump, where 3 sodium gets pumped out of the cell and 2 sodiums get in. This is important in maintaining and creating electrical gradients in the cell. It's very important, for example, to maintain nerve impulses and regulating muscle contractions, etc. Now, we have 2 types of active transport. We have primary active transport, where we have the direct use of ATP, so like the sodium-potassium pump. But then we have secondary active transport, where we use energy stored in gradients. So, for example, glucose transport coupled with sodium. Now, what is bulk transport? Well, we have endocytosis. This is bringing larger substances into the cell. So endo, you can think of it like enter. So something is entering the cell. Compared to exo, you can think of EX as exit. So something is leaving the cell. Now, when we talk about endocytosis, we have different types. We can talk about phagocytosis, where the cell is eating whatever it is, like engulfing the bacteria. We have pinocytosis, cell drinking, for example, taking in fluid. We have receptor-mediated endocytosis, so selective intake using specific receptors. And then we have exocytosis, so removing large substances from the cell. And here you have an example of neutrophils engulfing a bacteria. So here's the bacteria. In the process of endocytosis, it is entering the cell, or the macrophage, let's say here, and then it's degraded, and then it goes through exocytosis, leaving the cell. So, how does transport maintain balance in the cell? Let's summarize. So, transport in maintaining homeostasis. Examples: ion gradients maintain nerve impulses, for example, action potentials. Glucose transport ensures energy availability. Osmosis regulates cell hydration. So, to go a bit deeper here, we said ion gradients maintain nerve impulses. So, in the cell, right, without going too in depth here, in the cell, we have electrical activity. And we have this gradient that is set at a certain negative level, like, for example, 70 millivolts, right? Imagine that the charge in this cell is minus 70 millivolt. Now, if you have a lot of positive ions or cations like calcium coming in here with positive charges, this negative 70, right? This negative 70 will start moving towards zero. Now, pretend at, for example, minus 30 millivolts, so it's much closer now to zero. Other things start to happen. Let's say there are doors on this cell wall that open when we reach minus 30. And we can call these, for example, low voltage potassium channels, as an example. So if you reach minus 30, suddenly these low voltage potassium channels will open and allow for potassium to rush into the cell, let's say. And that will add additional positivity to this cell, reaching quickly to zero, let's say. And when zero is hit, imagine that's the line, that's the point where the cell now depolarizes. So an action potential can be created like that. So the influx and efflux of ions is super crucial for this balance and the creation of action potentials. And you will learn in future lectures about the resting membrane potential, the depolarizing, repolarizing action potentials, etc. All of this is very crucial and high yield, and we will return to it as we move on in the lectures. We have glucose transport requiring ensuring energy availability. And of course, osmosis regulating cell hydration. Now, transport mechanisms work to prevent swelling or shrinkage of cells, balance intercellular and extracellular fluid composition. But what happens if these processes then fail? So some examples of transport-related disorders could be cystic fibrosis, where faulty chloride transport, right? Faulty chloride transport leads to thick mucus buildup. Dehydration, so a disruption in the process of osmosis due to, for example, fluid loss, lead to dehydration. Edema, so excess fluid in tissues caused by disrupted osmotic balance. Now, transport mechanisms are targets for treatment. For example, we have something called diuretics for fluid balance. If we want to flush out a lot of fluid in our body, we use diuretics. So when transport systems fail, the body struggles to stay balanced, leading to the development of diseases. So in summary then, passive and active transport allows cells to regulate their internal environment. Bulk transport moves large substances. Proper transport is essential for homeostasis and overall health. And that's the end of chapter 4. Continue now to chapter 5.